Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CXPA 2019 Fresh Thinking Panel, Customer-Centric Culture, Building and Sustaining a Customer-Centric Culture. We are so excited that you are spending your CX Day with the Customer Experience Professionals Association. My name is Derek Iverson, and I am a Membership Community Manager with the CXPA. You can find me at derek@cxpa.org. Just in case you have any questions on what it's like to be a CXPA member, I'm your guy. And for you CCXPs who are watching, you are eligible to submit 0.5 CEUs for viewing today's panel. Our panel today will be moderated by Liliana Petrova, CCXP and CEO and founder of the Petrova Experience. She is a visionary and proven leader in the field of customer experience and innovation. With JetBlue, Ms. Petrova pioneered a new customer-centric culture, energizing the more than 15,000 JetBlue employees with her vision. She's been recognized for her GFK lobby design and facial recognition program with awards from Future Travel Experience and Popular Science. In 2019, she founded the Petrova Experience, an international customer experience consulting firm that helps brands improve their customer experience. And our panelists today represent diverse experiences and global perspectives. Annette Franz, CCXP, is founder and CEO of CX Journey, a customer experience consultancy. She's an internationally recognized customer experience thought leader, coach, speaker, and author of Customer Understanding, 3 Ways to Put the Customer in Customer Experience and at the Heart of Your Business, with more than 25 years of experience in the customer experience discipline. She currently serves as the vice chair of the CXPA Board of Directors. Jeannie Walters, CCXP, CEO and founder of Experience Investigators by 360 Connects, has spent more than 20 years evaluating and improving customer experiences and teaching her trademarked methodology to enlightened leaders in many industries. She is a certified customer experience professional, a CX expert panel member for the Customer Experience Professionals Association, a professional member of the National Speakers Association, a C-suite network advisor, a LinkedIn learning instructor, and a TEDx speaker. Nienke Bloem, CCXP, is often called the Customer Experience Guru. She leads a speaking practice, a CX game company, a training business, and is an associate partner of a CX boutique consultancy firm. So she breathes customer experience. With her 20 years corporate experience, she speaks the business language, and with her 5 years entrepreneurial CX experience, she knows how to make CX a business success. She's one of the 5 global resource and training providers of the CXPA as well. Before earning his CCXP certification, Scott Draeger spent over 20 years creating software to design and produce customer communications for leading banks, insurers, telcos, and other enterprises. Currently, Scott is Quadient's VP of Customer Transformation, where he oversaw the product portfolio during a customer-focused UI redesign that impacted the entire software portfolio, earning Quadient improved ratings for both customers and analysts. He also oversaw the creation of Quadient's customer journey mapping product, which debuted in 2015. For fun, Scott plays and collects pinball machines and is ranked in the top 10% in the world, which is awesome. So without further ado, I will now turn the panel discussion over to our moderator, Liliana.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We are all very passionate about CX Day and very passionate about customer-centric culture. I think you're not going to be disappointed today. And before we kind of lose any more time, I just want to jump right into it and ask our panelists, what are the foundational pieces that every organization needs to build customer-centric culture? Let's start with Scott and go around the table.
Thanks, Liliana. One of the things I think is most important is to start with stories. One time I worked at a software startup, and all the stories were about somebody coded something at midnight to win a deal or get the customer deal signed, and that became legends within the company. But the same story rephrased as, hey, we could solve a customer's problem, or we got the chance to prove that we could do it for the customer, the same stories expressed in just a little bit different way makes a CX culture.
Thank you, Jean.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in having a customer experience mission and something that somebody can tuck into their heart. It's not necessarily the big thing with vision values, all the bullet points. This is a phrase that everybody can rally around. And in my business, it's to create fewer ruined days for customers. And the way we use that, we share it with clients. We start every staff meeting. We make sure that it's front and center in everything we do. And I think a lot of places skip that step. And it's much harder to build a culture if you don't know where you're going with that mission.
Annette?
I would say, and you know, both of those responses are right in line with that, right? Customer-centric cultures are really deliberately designed. It doesn't just happen by accident, right? To sort of follow on to what Jeannie said, and to Scott's point as well, I think core values, your core values have to certainly be in line with a customer-centric organization, and you've got to define the behaviors that go along with those values so people really understand what they mean and how they can use them day in and day out. The other thing is that customer understanding. You know, customer understanding is really the cornerstone of customer centricity. It's about knowing who your customers are, understanding their needs, their pain points, the problems they're trying to solve, and how well you're performing against all of that, and then bringing that into the organization. So you've got to bring the customer voice into the organization. You can't have a customer-centric culture without bringing the customer in. So that's my answer.
Last but not least.
Yeah. Oh, well, I really love how Scott and Annette and Jeannie would, because I thought there's 3 elements that are crucial. I think you have to think big and you have to design it. So you need to have the core values that everybody understands, and you can hire the right people that also and translate it in behavior. Don't forget that. Just the value, like quality, what do you mean? So I think the values, then I really think the listening, bring the voice of the customer, the outside in, bring it in and communicate. And I really think at this moment we need engaged leaders that walk the talk. So these 3 elements are for me the fundamentals.
I'm so happy you mentioned that, because the behaviors is where I think many brands kind of stumble upon. People know values, but they don't know what that means day in and day out. And in JetBlue, I think they did an amazing job translating in every individual role what it means day in and day out, and that's kind of what brought it to life in front of the customer. Thank you so much for this kind of laying the framework around customer-centric culture. What would you suggest companies can do if they have gotten the basics? So let's say we have a brand that already has the mission, has the values. Let's assume they have some sort of behaviors already framed. What's next? Let's kind of go around the same order, if you guys don't mind. Scott?
Okay. One of the things I think is very important is a lot of folks think they're immune from some of these projects. So they might think customer experience is sales, customer experience is marketing or support. Sometimes, especially in my area of the business, we see IT people who are very much the last people to know or care about a CX change. And there's a lot of places where they have access to data, information, where things they're normally doing could actually push out and help other teams. So don't give anybody a pass or a way out, or let people think that this is someone else's project. We want to know that we can participate and make things better. So no free passes.
That's so true. You know, there was an article last year I wrote about this, and I named it, "You may have the customer experience job and not know it." And IT is a big culprit in that. They are the builders of the future user experiences, and somehow they don't think they own the experience these days. What do you want to say about that, Jeanine?
I think I totally agree with everything that was just said, because there is this still kind of wall sometimes between customer-facing roles and non-customer-facing roles. But of course, every single person contributes to the customer experience. So one of the things that I think we often overlook is looking inside. How do we hire? How do we write job descriptions? How do we hold managers and leadership accountable for their own role in getting everybody on board with this? Because if you look at, I looked recently at the list of the 18 most common job interview questions. None of them have the word customer in it. None of them actually talk about what the experience is. And so I think we need to connect those dots internally in order to make sure we're building a culture from the inside out, not just trying to shift everything after somebody's accepted a role that is not defined the right way.
So true.
I love that. I'll bounce right off of that and just say that, you know, it's great to have all those foundational elements in place, but if you don't do something with all of that or about all of that, then it's pointless, right? So you've got to hire, fire, promote based on those core values. Your executives have to model and reinforce. So any type of praise or recognition or any of that stuff has to be linked back to those core values. Orientation, onboarding, ongoing training around the core values, around the customer and the customer experience, bringing that voice of the customer in again to those orientation, onboarding, training, everything, right? We talk about the customer in every meeting, right? We start meetings with customer stories, not with metrics. I think that's a really important thing. No decisions, no discussions, no designs, nothing is done without thinking about the impact on the customer and how will this impact the customer? How will this affect the customer? How will this solve a problem for her? You know, those kinds of conversations have to be had day in and day out. And it feels, you know, it feels like a lot of work, but it's not. It's really just a shift in the way you're thinking and the way you're doing things. So, and then I would just add, because we need to call this out too, is that a customer-centric culture actually doesn't begin until we focus on our people, until we focus on our employees and have a great employee experience. So really it's customer-centric culture is all about starting with your employees and making sure that, you know, again, they understand the values, we hire the right people, we train them, we coach them along, and they have a great experience too. So I think that's an important part of this.
Take it away.
Yay. Well, I think I love the comments on the employee experience versus and what Jeannie said about the what's, for example, in job descriptions. It's so true. I think when you're a little bit more advanced with these companies, what we're saying, I've got two examples that I've seen lately that I really love. One is of a big telco where what they did is a big ambassador program. So they've got the values, they've got the behaviors, and then they did like additions, like in the voice of or where people of the company could really go for an audition and become one of the ambassadors and train others to really spread it, to make it visible, create stories, but also show faces to the behavior so that it became human. So I love that example. And another one is of a large B2B, is where they had the behaviors and then they had a large voice of the customer program, really professional, and then they were a little bit struggling how to engage employees, and they added very simple a voice of the employee program, just listening, doing roundtables, doing focus groups, and doing some surveys and acting upon it. And I love that because it sounds so easy because it's there. So with high response rate. So I love that as like more the pro version.
Yeah, not that. I would just.
I'd like to add one more thing that we haven't mentioned either is a culture committee. You know, as part of the governance throughout, you know, with your CX transformation, the culture committee is such an important piece, and they're going to be really helpful in keeping this culture alive and well, and getting sort of that grassroots groundswell throughout the organization as well. So I think that's an important piece.
I was part of the culture committee in JetBlue when I first started.
Nice.
Thank you for bringing that up. It was so much fun.
What was your experience? We'll reverse the questions here for a second. What was your experience? Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, it was amazing. First, I was shocked that there is one. Because
right?
banking industry where nobody cared about culture. And the experience was really fun because I got to meet many people from different areas of the organization. Yep. Through the passion of being involved. And we would coordinate a lot of events. And for us, at least, it was celebrating different culture values in different parts of the year. So it was great.
That's awesome.
Really great. My favorite about the advancement in the culture space is also corporate compensation, executive compensation. I don't think we talk a lot about that because it's somewhat of a sensitive area. But if the executive comp is kind of depends on some measures of customer satisfaction, I think brands see a lot of impact. And that's something that, you know, more advanced companies can look into.
Hopefully we'll be adding 181 companies to that list here shortly. So
I mean, that's the real commitment, Annette, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's not get into that one.
I'll back out of this one. So let's talk about obstacles, because what doesn't have obstacles? What do you think is the biggest obstacle in implementing and maintaining customer-centric culture? Let's start from the European angle of our roundtable today on this one.
Well, I've been thinking about this question. I'm like, what's the biggest hurdle? Because I think we can just manage 20, but I like to start from an outside-in perspective. What I see is that the branding part and behavioral part begins to really land, but what I really miss is clearness for consistency, because you have to deliver every day. It's not just a one-off, what we see, and that's also the endurance you expect, but that means that you need consistency. And for me, employees, they have to understand what they have to do. They have to be able, that means for your contact center, they have the right software, that they are well, and people in stores can really well sell, they understand the products. And I think the third one, they have to just have the energy and the power to do so. So for me, this consistent part, I think that will be, if you focus on that and then reverse engineer, you need to just lay it down. And these three elements for employees, I think that will really, if you have that, then you can go.
Mm-hmm. Annette?
I would say it starts at the top. I'm just going to go right to the top. If the CEO isn't on board, if the executive team isn't on board, ain't nobody on board, right? So if they're not walking, and I've witnessed this, unfortunately, with some clients. If the executive team seems to put themselves above the law, so to speak, right, above the core values and everything, and the employees know that's a joke, right? So that's my answer. Starts at the top, and that's the biggest obstacle, I think.
And then it quickly goes into a joke. It goes really bad, Yes,
it goes really bad, really bad.
Can I piggyback on that one? Because I totally agree. And I also think that in today's environment right now, there isn't a consistency of who's really the owner of the customer experience. So it could be the CMO, it could be the CEO, it could be the COO, or even digital. We see it all over. And the tenure of those roles is like 18 months in today's market. And so we have very inconsistent leadership, and we don't give our leaders really that recipe for long-term success when we're holding them accountable in these short-term ways. And so we also have a saying here of we only work with enlightened leaders, because you can tell if somebody is not on board, then they're going to roll out this as lip service. They're going to check it off their list and then say, well, customer experience doesn't work, and move on. And if they're not able to both, set that long-term vision in a way that gets everybody on board, but then also keep their job long enough to actually have the power to do something, that's really hard to overcome. That's a real obstacle that a lot of organizations are facing right now.
Yeah, I never thought of that, because I'm used to long-term leaders. Just kind of happened to be in my career. But the incentives, again, the financial incentives are short-term. And now that we're moving towards being more connected with financial incentives, not just customer, feedback, because that makes us more relevant to the business. Now we're going to be threatened by the same problems that Wall Street has with short-term versus long-term look.
Yep.
Yeah. Scott, before we go, just one more, Jeannie, I'm sorry. Do you mind telling us, how would you overcome that? What do you think we can do about it?
Anyone have a magic wand? No,
it's got to be a heavy one so you can beat them over the head, right?
Yeah, it has to come from the leadership of the CEO or the board, depending on the organization. And they have to be brave. They have to kind of step up and say, we are going to invest in this. We know, first of all, change is hard. Human beings do not like change. So anytime you're trying to go through a transformation, you're going to get resistance from employees and customers, even though long-term it might be good for them. Anybody who's had a software update, right? Like the minute we get that software update, we go, oh my gosh, not a software update. And then a month later, we're like, I love these new features. So human beings make no sense. So we have to kind of look at that in a longer term way. And that's the only way. And you have to have people on the top who are brave enough to paint that vision and to live it, because otherwise it gets really scary. And it gets scary to have that type of feedback, and then we react, and then we're in the same cycle again.
Liliana, can I add on that? Especially for the people that are watching on CXA, are CX leaders, I think. And what I've seen is that sometimes CX leaders are afraid to really ask big money. So what you see is they try to do like small things and little programs. And if you want to be taken seriously, ask outrageously. So I think our CX leaders sometimes need to step up, think bigger, because if you want change, you cannot just do that with just a few euros, a small team. So what if you can make clear what you want to reach and what your results should be, really think back and then ask big. You'll be taken more seriously than when you ask small.
Absolutely. I think Scott has something to say about software implementations.
Yeah, no picking on the software people. But when I was looking at the obstacles and thinking about this question, there's going to be a moment where every employee is going to be faced with the decision of, do I want to do something that hits my financial metric that I was taught to do, or am I going to take this moment to hit the customer and do something right for the customer? And that's going to give them time to think about what's going to happen in my year-end review and what's going to happen now. And the way that the company is built is really the obstacle. If that employee feels empowered to take the CX forward path without getting a penalty, they're going to see that. I think that's really wrapped up in some of the key budget differences. Before the sale, you have sales and marketing money that's about growth thinking. And then after the sale, it's about cost savings. So you have different financial systems, different accounting systems, and they're all looking inside at their own performance metrics. Once they start to understand how they work with each other, they can interact and then make sure that what they're doing first and foremost isn't messing up things. Then you can worry about making it better. Because right now I see companies spending a lot of money on IT technology to try and do better, but they're actually making things more complicated and making it worse.
Yes. Oh my God, I just said this to my manager this morning. I'm working with a client off the record here. I know it's public, but I'm not going to say who. But they have 3 chat systems in 3 different places with 3 providers. None of them is even connecting to the other one. And I'm like, who is this helping?
Mm-hmm.
It's just so hard. And at the same time, the leaders probably are thinking they're making some customer-centric programs. It's not. No, that's not it.
No, because you know what that does is it affects the employee experience too, right? Because I think a lot of times we buy all these different systems and go, here, go do your job. And, the employees haven't been talked to or consulted with about what their job is and what they need to do. And then they bring in these systems, like you said, that don't talk to each other. And it just makes it really painful for employees. And obviously that makes it painful then for customers too.
So how do we, I guess I just want, now that you brought this, Scott, and I'm just now in it, how do we get to a place where we talk about this, where we don't, if an organization is customer-centric, one would imagine that if the second system comes, somebody would ask the question, does this speak with the first system? Where are those conversations supposed to take place so we can catch it?
I think Jeannie said the right thing. Humans make no sense, right? Yeah. and people, they just don't think that way. Unless you're truly in a customer-centric organization, one that walks the walk and talks the talk, people just don't even think that way, and that's part of the problem.
Well, and it goes back to accountability and what are we actually measuring success on? And so if somebody is measured, to Scott's point, on cost savings for their little world, their little fiefdom, then they're going to say, look at how many, calls I prevented by installing this chat system. And if somebody else has that same thing and they're buddies with another vendor, it can happen. So I think that if you figure out how to have that balanced approach of, yes, we absolutely need to save money and we absolutely need to make money as companies, but we also need to take care of our customers, and that leads to more money, by the way. So why don't we hold people accountable in both those ways, and not just about their little world, but about the entire customer journey?
We
Yeah,
say
you can't
sign
talk change and keep doing the same, right? You know, you've got to, if you're going to talk about change, then you've got to start asking these questions. How does this impact the employee? How does this impact the customer? How is this connected? How are we going to use it? Why? What problem does this solve for employees and for customers, right? So, and the metrics have to reflect the right thing and not the wrong thing. We know what those are.
Yeah. Well, now that you're talking, I think in JetBlue, we did have an executive meeting that was every month. And to be frank, going back to your point earlier, it was at the top. And that's where these programs would be brought. So we would see the whole journey. And I think it's again at the top that somebody needs to prioritize their time at an executive level to talk across functional so they can see the whole end-to-end journey.
Sounds like a chief customer officer to me.
Yeah. But to be frank, in our case, it was, you know, the CMO, the CIO, the chief customer experience officer, and the operation, the CO. So it was they would meet monthly, and it was religion. So I think the consistency also helped that these projects don't get off kind of doing the short-term stuff.
I think you make an important point, right? That there has to be this partnership. You know, it can't just be like the individual C-level executives have their own sort of points and think that they're going to go and do this within their departments. There has to be this partnership across the organization, and they're all working hand in hand.
True that. Well, let's talk about what happens in a non-ideal world. Let's say, you know, an organization is going through transformation or some other change management that is probably external. How do you suggest that leaders keep, you know, customer centricity, you know, as a focus in time of change? Nienke, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I've thought about it, and I think I have 3 examples that might just appeal our viewers. And I thought one of them is really show example behavior. We already talked about it, but this is about the CX leaders, not only about the about CEOs or about other leaders, but our CX leaders. And I love the example of Gabi Laudy. She's the CX manager of the Rijksmuseum. And when she came in, what she did is she ordered a uniform of the reception, and she ordered a uniform of a safety guard. And like every other week, she joins either teams for a day, and she shows that she's interested, she's there, and now other leaders are doing it too. So I love that you can show sample behavior yourself, so really small. I also really love the second element, more get facts and figures. If it's time of organizational rest and things are bad, it might affect the customer experience. So make sure that as a CX leader that you have your facts and figures quantitatively and qualitatively. And if things go down, if the metrics go down, be at that board meeting where you need to discuss these and show that you're a leader in your field. And the third one, what I miss in those darker days, as a CX leader, you can bring in some fun. Do bring in great customer stories that people that are rocking it, celebrate target behavior. So these 3 elements, I thought
Sounds good. Annette?
I think it's key that you just keep doing what you're doing, right? Stay the course, even in times of change. I mean, this is probably the most important time to keep listening to your customers and keep listening to your employees and keeping a pulse on what's going on and closing the loop with them and following up with them to let them know that, hey, you know what? Yeah, there's some tough things happening right now, but we're not shifting away from our focus. I think another thing that the CX leaders can do is to solidify their partnerships across the organization, right? This is a good time to say, hey, let's continue to lock arms and keep working together here and not fall apart. And then the last thing I would say is have a pre-mortem. Get a plan in place. Like, think about that now. I know we're on the verge of a recession here in the U.S. within the next probably year or two, whatever that may be, but have a plan in place, right? If you know that there's an acquisition or a merger going to be happening and there's talks about it, there's rumblings about it, start talking about it today and figure out how you're going to stay the course when that change happens. So I think that's a really important thing, is to do a sort of a pre-mortem where we start talking about what are the risks to both employees and to customers when this this acquisition or whatever the organizational change may be, reorg, whatever it is, right?
Great ideas. Jeannie?
Well, I totally agree that staying the course is a big part of it. And I think that goes right back to if you know who you are and where you're going, and if you know those values, you can't talk about them necessarily in the same way all the time, but you have to talk about them more than you think. We have to communicate more than we think within the organization around, you know what, maybe one of the values that I've seen with a client was warm welcome. They wanted to make sure that everybody who was coming in was getting this warm welcome. Well, then they had all this construction and issues, and it was a mess, and they were going through a rebrand because of an acquisition, and they were kind of like giving up on that. And instead, we said, okay, how can we make this crazy time all about this way to live our value in a different way? And so we came up with a plan around that. And I think that it's all about communication and letting everybody throughout your organization know that you're not giving up, that you're not just focused on the change at hand short term, that you're looking at this in different ways, but you have to communicate, and then communicate again.
So true. So amen.
One of the things that I really think is important is to make sure you know who you are when these tough times happen. And over here at Quadient, our Chief People Officer, Stephanie Oshaby, she worked with the group, talking to hundreds of people around the company to come up with our values of EPIC. So it's empowered, inspired, passionate, community focused. And that kind of frames who we are. So when we have a rough day, we know that we're empowered to go beyond if we need to. We need to be passionate about what we do. So it explains what they expect every day. And since we all know it and we can see it, it helps us prepare for what may be some rough days on the horizon. At least we know who we are and why we're here. And it's not just to turn a crank and collect a paycheck. So it puts value on the employees. I think that's really important, and that's at the highest level. We have a Chief People Officer who oversaw the project, didn't create and push the values down, but make sure that the values kind of percolated up from field interviews.
Thank you. I agree with all of you. I mean, I went through somewhat of a transition when I was in JetBlue, and one thing that saved us was exactly what Annette was saying, doing what we used to do. When people show up at the same meetings, although there's a big things happening, they signal to everybody that nothing is changing in terms of how we do business. I think that kept us alive. And going back to the communication, telling the front line that nothing's changing on that front, because people get anxious. People get inevitably very anxious that time of change means everything's changing. So kind of defining what's changing and what's not changing is what keeps the boat stable.
Yeah, if I may add to that, Liliana, and especially Jeannie, what I often see in these times in the communication is that they don't really tell the truth, and employees know. Employees are not dumb. So when there is a message to share, please share it. Don't keep it back, because it will hit you in the head later, to your business leaders. Please.
And make it a real message. I was with a company where the message was stay positive, stay positive, stay positive. That was the message. And it's like, what is that? What?
You're going to lose your job and stay positive. Yay.
You're right, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for all of this. I think this is what our time is. So I'll pass this mic to Derek to wrap it up.
Great. Thank you so much, Liliana, and to the rest of our panelists for your time today. A huge, big virtual round of applause to all of you for sharing your thought leadership as we explored the customer-centric culture competency. And I wish you all a very happy CX Day, and that you've taken something away from our panelists that you can implement into your own CX program to end 2019 strong and kick off 2020 with a bang. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great day. Enjoy your CX Day. Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. All righty then. I think we're
there we